Long before birds claimed the sky and mammals scurried toward the Anthropocene, Earth belonged to titans. But not all giants roared or hunted. Some whispered their legacy through silence and bone, armored pilgrims of time, carrying shields upon their backs and lances at their tails. These were stegosaurs, the quiet juggernauts of the Jurassic. In a prehistoric world saturated with evolutionary experimentation, stegosaurs were not predators, nor were they built for speed or cunning. Instead, they were paradoxes, absurdly small-brained, yet highly specialized, slow yet not defenseless, plant-eaters clad in a panoply of dermal armor. While predators like Allosaurus evolved serrated teeth and slashing claws, stegosaurs invested in defense. Osteoderms hardened into plates, tails weaponized into multi-ton hammers with sharpened spikes. Their plates, elegantly vascularized and likely flushed with blood, may have signaled health, attracted mates, or regulated body temperature. Function meant flourish. Biology meant beauty. They were walking sculptures of bone and keratin, evolutionary art pieces meandering through Jurassic woodlands. They coexisted with sauropods that stretched longer than blue whales and theropods that could dismember prey in seconds. But while these giants waged battles of height and hunger, stegosaurs thrived in the undergrowth, patient grazers navigating fern prairies and conifer forests with an unhurried resilience. Their tale is not one of domination, but of quiet endurance. Today, stegosaurs capture the imagination like few others, and not just because of their alien anatomy. They represent a critical chapter in the story of dinosaur evolution, the rise of armored herbivores, the push and pull of predator-prey dynamics, and the ability of life to innovate wildly in response to pressure. What if survival wasn't about outsmarting your enemy, but outlasting them? This is not just a documentary about a group of strange dinosaurs. This is a journey into deep time, into the biomechanics of armor, the function of form, and the evolutionary strategy of standing your ground. This is the untold story of a lineage that chose shields over spears, and left behind a legacy written in stone, spine, and spike. To understand stegosaurs is to trace an evolutionary experiment, one that began humbly, with small, scute-covered dinosaurs skittering through the early Jurassic underbrush. These ancestors didn't yet wield plates or Thagomizers, but they carried within them the genetic toolkit for transformation. The story of the stegosaurs is not just about armor, it's about escalation. The evolutionary arms race between predator and prey, and the incredible solutions that nature devised. It all begins with Thyreophora, the shield bearers. Early members like Scutellosaurus and Scelidosaurus were relatively small bipedal or semi-quadrupedal herbivores covered in bony studs. They represent the evolutionary rootstock from which two great lineages would diverge, the club-tailed ankylosaurs and the plate-backed stegosaurs. By the Middle Jurassic, around 170 million years ago, the stegosaur blueprint had begun to solidify. Huayangosaurus from China shows a primitive version of the iconic body plan: short forelimbs, elongated hind limbs, and a double row of vertical plates and tail spikes. From there, stegosaurs diversified across Laurasia, spreading across what is now Asia, Europe, and North America. Natural selection acted like a sculptor, exaggerating traits with each generation. Plates grew taller, spikes became more lethal, and bodies bulked up to deter even the boldest predators. The tail, once used for balance, became a living flail. This wasn't just passive defense. Fossil evidence of puncture wounds in Allosaurus vertebrae suggests stegosaurs used their Thagomizers with deadly precision. One of the key evolutionary puzzles lies in the function of the plates. They were not armor in the traditional sense. They were too thin and poorly positioned for blocking attacks. However, CT scans show that they were richly vascularized, supporting the idea that they were used for thermoregulation, or perhaps for intraspecies display, like the antlers of deer or the frills of ceratopsians. This dual-function strategy, defense and social, speaks to a complex evolutionary story. Stegosaurs also represent a fascinating case of convergent and divergent evolution. As they spread across continents, isolated populations evolved into distinct genera, adapted to their local environments. Kentrosaurus in Africa evolved longer tail spikes and fewer plates. Tuojiangosaurus in China kept a primitive design. Stegosaurus in North America ballooned in size and flamboyance. By the early Cretaceous, however, stegosaurs were in decline. Faster, more efficient herbivores like hadrosaurs and ceratopsians outcompeted them. Their slow gait and rigid body plans may have left them inflexible in rapidly changing ecosystems. The last known stegosaurs, like Wuerhosaurus, vanished around 100 million years ago. But extinction is not erasure. Stegosaurs left behind an anatomical legacy that continues to inspire paleontologists, biochemists, and even artists. Their fossils are blueprints of an ancient experiment in defense, display, and durability. A reminder that even the strangest paths in evolution can lead to success, at least for a time. Stegosaurus, meaning roof lizard, is one of the most iconic and instantly recognizable dinosaurs to have ever walked the Earth. A genus of large, quadrupedal herbivorous dinosaurs from the late Jurassic period. Stegosaurus is distinguished by its distinctive double row of broad, kite-shaped plates along its back and a formidable spiked tail, features that have made it a subject of fascination for generations. Fossils of Stegosaurus have been unearthed primarily in the western United States, particularly within the famed Morrison Formation, as well as in Portugal. These deposits date back to the Kimmeridgian to Tithonian stages, approximately 155 to 145 million years ago, placing Stegosaurus among the dominant herbivores of its time. Within the Morrison Formation, 3 species are widely recognized: Stegosaurus stenops, Stegosaurus ungulatus, and Stegosaurus sulcatus. Collectively, the remains of over 80 individuals have been discovered, providing an exceptionally detailed look into the biology and diversity of this remarkable genus. Living alongside giant sauropods, such as Apatosaurus, Diplodocus, and Camarasaurus, Stegosaurus inhabited ecosystems also shared with formidable predators like Allosaurus, which may have viewed it as potential prey, albeit a dangerous one. Anatomically, Stegosaurus was a robust, heavily built dinosaur with a rounded back, short forelimbs, long hind limbs, and a tail typically held aloft. Its relatively low-slung head and short neck indicate it was adapted to feeding on low vegetation, such as ferns and cycads. Despite its imposing size, some specimens, like Stegosaurus ungulatus, reached lengths of up to 7.5 meters or 25 feet and weighed over 5 tons. Stegosaurus possessed an unusually small brain relative to its body size, contributing to its reputation as one of the most neurologically primitive dinosaurs. The purpose of its signature plates and spikes has long been debated. While early theories emphasized armor and thermoregulation, current research suggests the plates were likely used for visual display, possibly for species recognition, mate attraction, or intimidation, while the tail spikes, known colloquially as the Thagomizer, were almost certainly defensive weapons, capable of inflicting serious damage. Stegosaurus was first described by renowned paleontologist Othniel Charles Marsh during the infamous Bone Wars of the late 19th century. Initial fossils, discovered at what is now Dinosaur Ridge National Landmark in Colorado, were fragmentary and led to considerable misinterpretation, including early reconstructions that depicted the animal with its plates lying flat against the back. It would take decades of further discoveries and comparative anatomy before the animal's true posture and plate arrangement were properly understood. Despite its status as a cultural icon, Stegosaurus did not feature prominently in museum displays until the mid-20th century. Even today, most mounted skeletons are composites assembled from multiple individuals due to the rarity of complete specimens. More than just a symbol of prehistoric life, it stands as a testament to the complexity of evolution, where even a creature with a brain the size of a walnut could leave a legacy the size of history itself. Few dinosaurs are as visually unforgettable as Stegosaurus. Its silhouette, a lumbering quadruped crowned with twin rows of towering plates and armed with 4 tail-mounted spikes, has become an icon of prehistory. But beneath this dramatic display lies a body plan filled with contradictions. A creature at once heavily armored and seemingly under-equipped, massive in size, yet modest in cognitive capacity. Among the best-known species, Stegosaurus stenops typically measured around 6.5 meters or 21 feet in length and weighed close to 3.5 tons. Its cousin, Stegosaurus ungulatus, pushed the upper size limits, reaching up to 7 meters or 23 feet and 3.8 tons, with outlier specimens possibly extending to 7.5 meters and over 5 tons in body mass. These were not small animals. They were living fortresses, bristling with natural hardware designed for survival in a world ruled by giants. Until recently, nearly all of what we knew about Stegosaurus came from adult specimens. That changed in 1994, when the discovery of a subadult in Wyoming revealed a more nuanced picture. This juvenile, just 4.6 meters or 15 feet long and standing 2 meters or 6.6 feet at the hip, offered rare insight into the growth stages of these dinosaurs. Its skeleton, now displayed at the University of Wyoming Geological Museum, hints at a body that matured slowly, trading agility for armor as it aged. The head of Stegosaurus is a study in minimalism, long, low and narrow, perched just above the ground. The small skull housed an even smaller brain, roughly the size of a walnut, about 80 grams or 2.8 ounces in a body weighing over 4.5 tons. Early paleontologists, including Othniel Charles Marsh, were astonished by this imbalance, interpreting it as evidence of reptilian stupidity. And yet, modern science urges caution. A small brain doesn't necessarily mean a simple animal. Not when survival is encoded into the architecture of the body itself. Its beak, likely covered in keratin, was broad and extended far along the jaws, possibly more than in any other known ornithischian. This specialized feeding mechanism would have been ideal for cropping low-lying vegetation, especially cycads and ferns. Toothless at the front and equipped with small, flat, triangular teeth at the back, Stegosaurus wasn't built to chew like a cow. It was a bulk browser, stripping plants and processing them just enough to digest slowly in its vast gut. Whether or not it had cheeks, once thought to be essential for holding food, remains a point of debate. It is still argued that the extended ridges around the jaws may have supported a turtle-like beak. Others suggest the possibility of fleshy cheeks, like those in other ornithischians. Either interpretation paints Stegosaurus as a highly specialized herbivore, adapted for a narrow ecological niche close to the ground. So, how does a creature so heavily built, so underbrained, and so visually bizarre survive for millions of years? The answer lies in the quiet genius of its design. Stegosaurus may not have been fast, but it didn't need to be. Its body was an evolutionary compromise, a combination of passive armor, active defense, and visual display, all mounted on a surprisingly efficient grazing machine. In the end, Stegosaurus reminds us that intelligence isn't always measured in brain size. Sometimes it's written in the success of survival. Those plates and tail spikes get all the attention, but Stegosaurus's skeleton tells an equally amazing story. Starting with the spine, and yes, Stegosaurus had a lot of spine, in Stegosaurus stenops, the vertebral column in front of the hips included 27 vertebrae, and the tail had around 46 more. That's over 70 vertebrae running from nose to tail tip. Compared to its relatives like Huayangosaurus or Hesperosaurus, Stegosaurus actually had more back and neck bones, an evolutionary stretch, quite literally. Now up front, it had about 10 cervical, neck vertebrae, and as you move down its back, about 17 dorsals, making the body long and surprisingly flexible, at least for something that looked like a walking tank. As we move into the hip region, things get more interesting. Most subadult Stegosaurus individuals had 4 fused sacral vertebrae, but one of the back vertebrae often joined the group too, kind of a bonus vertebra getting promoted to sacral duty. And sometimes a tail vertebra joined in as well, becoming what scientists call a caudosacral. Talk about teamwork. Now let's follow that tail, which, by the way, was not dragging on the ground like in those old museum skeletons. It was lifted high, muscular, and ended in 4 spiked Thagomizer. Along the way, those tail vertebrae gradually shrank in size. Around vertebra 35, the neural spines, the upward projections, disappeared completely. But in the middle of the tail, the spines bifurcated, splitting into 2 like a forked lightning bolt. Why? We're not entirely sure, but it made that tail look even more menacing. But Stegosaurus wasn't all tail. It had a big, beefy body supported by powerful limbs. Its front legs were shorter than the back, giving it a low-slung, slope-backed posture. Each front foot had 5 toes, but only the 2 innermost had blunt, hoof-like tips. The rest were basically along for the ride. The back feet? Just 3 short, strong toes, perfectly adapted for supporting all that bulk. Despite its size, Stegosaurus walked on padded feet, much like elephants today. And that tail we mentioned? It was high off the ground, likely to keep it clear for swinging. Meanwhile, its small head stayed low, probably no more than a meter or 3.3 feet above the ground, perfectly positioned for snacking on ferns and low-growing plants. Now let's talk about what really made Stegosaurus a prehistoric celebrity: those incredible dermal plates. Between 17 and 22 of these massive bony structures lined its back in 2 rows. And no, they weren't laid out like matching pairs. In Stegosaurus stenops, the plates were staggered, not symmetrical, almost like nature was going for visual flair rather than balance. Each plate was a modified osteoderm. Think of them as supercharged skin bones, similar in origin to the scales of crocodiles or the armor of armadillos. The largest plates, right over the hips, could grow over 60 centimeters wide and tall. That's roughly 2 feet in each direction. Here's the cool part: they weren't connected to the skeleton at all. These plates grew out of the skin, held in place by soft tissue and likely covered in a keratinous sheath, like fingernails or rhino horns. We know this because skin impressions from close relatives like Hesperosaurus show long, shallow grooves in the surface, perfect for anchoring keratin. And get this, no 2 plates are exactly alike. Some researchers describe them as chiral, meaning they're asymmetrical and come in left and right versions. But even then, no perfect matches have been found on the same individual. It's like each plate was custom grown, maybe for visual identity, like fingerprints for dinosaurs. In 2010, paleontologist Peter Galton even suggested that the arrangement and profile of these plates might have helped stegosaurs recognize each other across species, a prehistoric version of showing your team colors. In Stegosaurus ungulatus, for example, the tail had flattened, spine-like plates that were mirror images of one another, a rare hint that some parts of the body might have had paired armor after all. Let's rewind the clock to the 1870s, when Stegosaurus was first unearthed. Its strange proportions left scientists scratching their heads. Paleontologist Othniel Charles Marsh, the man who named it, initially thought it walked on 2 legs. And to be fair, the short forelimbs made that seem logical. But in 1891, Marsh had changed his mind. The sheer weight and build of Stegosaurus just didn't support a bipedal lifestyle. It was, without a doubt, a 4-legged walker. But that didn't end the conversation. Some paleontologists, including Robert Bacher, later proposed that Stegosaurus might have reared up on its powerful hind legs, using its tail like a third leg, forming a tripod to reach taller plants, kind of like a Jurassic giraffe on its tiptoes. Others, like Kenneth Carpenter, weren't convinced, and while a study in 2010 found that Kentrosaurus, a close cousin, could potentially rear up, it cast doubt on the idea that the tail could really work like a kickstand. Speaking of legs, Stegosaurus had a unique setup. Its forelimbs were noticeably shorter than its hind limbs, giving it that signature sloped-back look. And within those beefy hind legs, the lower bones, the tibia and fibula, were short compared to the femur. Translation? This dinosaur wasn't built for speed. Estimates suggest a top speed of 15 to 18 kilometers per hour, or about 9.5 to 11 miles per hour. A brisk jog for a human, maybe, but not enough to outrun a hungry predator. Interestingly, fossilized trackways tell us more than bones ever could. In Colorado, paleontologist Matthew Mossbrooker discovered Stegosaurus footprints that seemed to show multi-age herds traveling together, adults walking alongside juveniles. In one spot, tiny tracks from 4 or 5 baby stegosaurs march in the same direction. In another, a young one's footprints are overlaid by an adult's, maybe a sign of protection or parenting. Now let's talk about something paleontology rarely discusses: dinosaur romance. With those huge plates running down the back, how did Stegosaurus even mate? Some scientists suggest the female may have laid on her side while the male approached from behind. Others believe the female may have crouched low in front, raising her hips and tail, while the male supported himself on her back. But here's the problem. Male dinosaurs show no evidence of structures like a baculum, and the pelvis doesn't show attachment points for mobile reproductive organs. So how mating actually worked remains one of paleontology's more awkward mysteries. Then there are the plates, the ultimate dinosaur fashion statement. But what were they for? Marsh originally thought they were for defense, maybe like a turtle shell, but other scientists quickly pointed out the flaws. The plates were fragile, thin, and left the dinosaur's sides totally unprotected. Not exactly a fortress. Others had different ideas. Robert Backer suggested the plates were covered in horns, similar to bison horns or rhino armor. He even proposed that Stegosaurus might have been able to pivot its plates side to side to ward off predators. Sounds dramatic, but most experts today think the plates were fixed in place and they weren't mobile blades. A more widely accepted idea is thermoregulation. The plates had grooves and channels for blood vessels, which might have helped the animal shed excess heat, like an ancient radiator. Think elephant ears or the sails on Dimetrodon. In 1986, researchers found the outer layers of the plates were extremely vascularized, a clue that may have helped to regulate body temperature. Later comparisons with alligator osteoderms supported the idea. But the theory has its critics. After all, not all stegosaurs had big, broad plates. Kentrosaurus, for example, had more spikes than plates, which raises the question, if thermoregulation was so critical, why didn't all stegosaurs evolve the same solution? Some scientists now suggest the opposite. Maybe the plates weren't for cooling off, but for soaking up heat during cooler Jurassic mornings. And then, there's the sexier idea. Literally, display. The plates could have been used for attracting mates, intimidating rivals, or signaling to other members of the species. Some scientists even think Stegosaurus could pump blood into the plates, causing them to flush red like a warning flag. And since the plates were likely covered in keratin, they might have been colorful, glossy, or even patterned. A 2015 study went a step further, suggesting the plates might have been sexually dimorphic. That is, males and females had different shapes. Males may have had wide, broad plates, females taller and narrower ones. It's speculative, but it fits with what we know from other animals today. Finally, there's the idea that these exaggerated structures helped stegosaurs identify each other, a sort of prehistoric name tag. But this idea has skeptics too, since modern animals rarely use bony structures alone for species recognition. Whatever the true purpose, one thing is clear: those plates made Stegosaurus unforgettable. Whether for heat, defense, mating, or identity, they were the dinosaur's most visible mystery. Let's talk about one of Stegosaurus's most iconic features, the tail spikes, or as cartoonist Gary Larson famously named them, the Thagomizer. Yes, that name actually caught on with paleontologists. Now, were these impressive spikes just flashy accessories, part of a display to impress or intimidate, or were they used for something more violent? Back in 1914, paleontologist Charles Gilmore leaned towards the idea that the spikes were only for show. But fast forward to the 1980s, and Robert Bakker had a very different opinion. He pointed out something crucial. Stegosaurus lacked ossified tendons in its tail, those stiffening rods that make tails rigid in many dinosaurs. This meant its tail was likely far more flexible, capable of whipping around with real force, a perfect setup for a natural weapon. However, not everyone was convinced. Paleontologist Ken Carpenter raised an interesting counterpoint. The large backplates overlapped with many of the tail vertebrae, which may have limited how much the tail could actually swing side to side. Still, Bakker had an answer for that too, suggesting Stegosaurus could pivot its rear end without moving its hind legs by planting them like pillars and pushing off with its powerful, muscular forelimbs. That might have let it swing its spiked tail like a mace with surprising speed and control. We now have direct fossil evidence supporting the idea that the tail wasn't just for display, it was used in combat. A 2005 study by McWhinney and colleagues found that nearly 10% of Stegosaurus tail spikes they examined had signs of trauma, injuries, breaks, and even healing, the kind of damage you'd expect if they were being slammed into something, like, say, a predator. By the smoking gun, a punctured tail vertebra from an Allosaurus, a known predator of the time, that matches perfectly with the size and shape of a Stegosaurus tail spike. The wound entered from below, drove upward, and showed signs of infection. That means it wasn't just a flesh wound, it was a serious blow that the predator lived with or possibly died from. The message is clear. Stegosaurus could hit, and it could hit hard. Now about the spikes themselves. Stegosaurus stenops, the most well-known species, had 4 of them, each one measuring between 60 and 90 centimeters. That's about 2 to 3 feet long. And here's something you don't often see in movies or toys. In many species, including Stegosaurus stenops, the spikes didn't stick up vertically. Fossil evidence shows they were angled horizontally, projecting out to the sides, like natural lances ready to sweep low and wide across the battlefield. Interestingly, Marsh, the original describer of Stegosaurus, believed that Stegosaurus ungulatus had 8 tail spikes, not 4. But recent studies have re-examined these fossils and concluded that even Stegosaurus ungulatus likely had just 4, like its cousin. So, what does this all mean? Far from being a gentle plant eater with harmless plates and decoration, Stegosaurus had a powerful, flexible tail armed with deadly spikes, capable of defending itself against even the fiercest predators of the late Jurassic. And as we now know, it did, and it left a mark that would fossilize into one of the most convincing cases of dinosaur-on-dinosaur combat we've ever found. A couple of juvenile Stegosaurus specimens have been preserved, and they're small, really small compared to full-grown giants. One is only about 1.5 meters or 4.9 feet long, and the other around 2.6 meters or 8.5 feet. What marks them clearly as youngsters? Their bones aren't fully fused. Things like the scapula, shoulder blade, and coracoid, or the lower parts of the hind limbs, are still separate. Their pelvis looks more like that of a Kentrosaurus juvenile than an adult Stegosaurus, so clearly they were still growing. Take a look at this. When scientists measured growth across many sizes of Stegosaurus, they discovered that these spikes and plates developed more slowly in terms of tissue structure than the rest of the skeleton, at least until maturity. In other words, your bony armor took time to catch up as you grew. Compare that to a close cousin, Kentrosaurus. A 2013 study found that Kentrosaurus grew faster overall, even though it was smaller. This challenges the old idea that bigger dinosaurs always grow faster. Turns out, size doesn't always predict speed of growth. And that's a question of metabolism. How fast Stegosaurus lived and used energy. A 2022 study by Weiman and team used chemical signatures, lipoxidation markers, in fossilized bones to estimate metabolic rates. Their results suggest Stegosaurus had a more reptile-like physiology, a metabolism that was ectothermic, cold-blooded, or perhaps gigantothermic, where large size helps retain heat. The same study hints that many ornithischians, the group that includes stegosaurs and many other plant eaters, might have evolved from ancestors with warmer metabolisms, gradually shifting towards something slower. Diet and jaw mechanics? That's where things get really curious. Unlike many other plant-eating dinosaurs, Stegosaurus didn't have the strong, grinding teeth or versatile jaw movement seen in ceratopsians or hadrosaurs. Its teeth were small, peg-shaped, and had horizontal wear facets, suggesting Stegosaurus inserted plant material, closed jaws vertically, and ground only a bit. No block of grinding teeth, no evidence of big chewy machinery, and no solid proof of gastroliths, stones swallowed to help grind food. So how did it process enough vegetation to keep a massive body going? That remains somewhat mysterious. What kinds of plants did Stegosaurus munch on? Probably the usual Jurassic menu: ferns, horsetails, mosses, cycads, conifers. Most evidence suggests low browsing, feeding less than a meter off the ground, as previously mentioned. But if some ideas about rearing up hold true, using its hind legs to reach higher, then maybe adults could stretch upward to 5 or 6 meters, about 15 to 20 feet, to grab taller foliage. There's even a computer simulation study from 2010 where scientists built 3-dimensional models of Stegosaurus jaws and teeth, then tested bite strength with simulated branches of different thicknesses. The results? Front teeth could manage smaller green twigs easily, anything over about 12 millimeters in diameter would have been a struggle, so the animal likely specialized in softer, easier-to-bite plants. However, a newer 2016 study changed the picture a bit. Using a well-preserved specimen known affectionately as Sophie from the Natural History Museum, UK, that study showed a bite force surprisingly strong, comparable to modern herbivores like sheep or cattle. With that strength, it seems plausible that Stegosaurus could handle tougher, woodier foliage like cycads, and maybe even play a role in spreading seeds. The prickle lizard of late Jurassic Africa, Kentrosaurus wasn't as massive as its cousin Stegosaurus, but it more than made up for it with an array of defensive spikes. About 4 to 4.5 meters or 13 to 15 feet long and weighing up to 1.6 tons, Kentrosaurus aethiopicus prowled what is now Tanzania around 152 million years ago. Discovered in the famous Tendaguru Formation and first described by German paleontologist Edwin Hennig in 1915, Kentrosaurus shares its home with giants like Giraffatitan and nimble predators such as Allosaurus. Though no complete skeleton has been found, hundreds of bones have helped scientists reconstruct how this spiky stegosaur moved and defended itself. Unlike Stegosaurus, which had broad, iconic plates running along its back, Kentrosaurus went all in on spikes. It had a double row of small plates along its neck and back that transformed into sharp spikes over the hips and tail. The tail ended in an impressive array of long stabbing spikes, perfect for fending off predators. And just for good measure, Kentrosaurus also had a long spike on each shoulder, turning its entire back half into a prehistoric weapon. Its body plan was classic stegosaur, a small head with a beak for nipping low vegetation, robust hind limbs, and shorter forelimbs. Interestingly, differences in thigh bone shape between individuals suggest that males and females may have had different body builds, possibly due to sexual dimorphism. While often thought of as a primitive stegosaur, modern studies show that Kentrosaurus was more closely related to Stegosaurus than previously believed. So next time you think of stegosaurs, don't just picture the one with the plates. Remember the spiky little sibling that knew how to throw down. Kentrosaurus may not have been a giant, but it packed serious prehistoric swagger. This small but mighty stegosaur weighed somewhere between 700 and 1600 kilograms, 1500 to 3500 pounds. Some fossils even hint at beefier individuals, possibly pushing into Stegosaurus territory in terms of limb development, especially in the elbow region, a Lecranon process for the Dino nuts. Like other stegosaurs, Kentrosaurus had that classic dinosaurian body plan: tiny head, long neck, short but muscular forelimbs, towering hind limbs, and a tail that could double as a medieval weapon. But here's where things get really interesting. Kentrosaurus had an unusually far back center of mass, thanks to its long, heavy tail, more typical of a biped than a four-legged creature. Still, it didn't walk on two legs. Its straight, column-like femurs show it relied on all fours, with strong forelimbs pulling 10 to 15% of its weight. And those hind limbs? Absolute powerhouses. With beefy thigh muscles anchored to a long ilium, Kentrosaurus could likely rear up into a tripod stance, tail planted, front legs up, to reach higher foliage or maybe even show off those weaponized spikes. Kentrosaurus didn't have much of a brain case, but it definitely had character. Though full skulls are rare, paleontologists have found 8 fossil pieces of the skull, jaws, and teeth in the Tendraguru beds. Most are isolated fragments, and, fun fact, 2 jaw joint bones, quadrates, once thought to belong to Kentrosaurus actually turned out to be a baby brachiosaur. Oops. The skull itself? Small, narrow, and low to the ground, perfect for a dinosaur that likely snacked on plants no more than knee-high. Like its relatives, it had a tiny antorbital fenestra, that classic dino skull hole between nose and eye, and its front teeth were gone, lightly replaced by a sharp, horny beak. That beak may not have stretched far back like in Stegosaurus, but it still would have made for efficient cropping of ferns and other low-lying greenery. Some researchers think instead of a full beak, it may have had fleshy cheeks tucked in there, a weird possibility for a spiky herbivore. 2 nearly complete brain cases tell us even more. Though squished by time and geology, they show Kentrosaurus had a brain that was short, deep, and pretty small, with some odd flexures and curving edges. Its brain was much like other stegosaurs, but details in the bones connecting the skull to the spine suggest it was a close match to Huayangosaurus. The occipital condyle, that big round ball connecting skull to neck, was notably large, a sturdy link for that heavy head and tail setup. As for its bite, only parts of the lower jaw survives, but it's nearly identical to a smaller Stegosaurus jaw. The teeth were classic Stegosaurian, small, leaf-shaped, rigid, and definitely not built for chewing through logs. Wear marks suggest some grinding happened, but not much. One complete cheek tooth has even fewer ridges than usual and sports a cingulum, a little shelf at the base of the crown that sets it apart from other stegosaurs. Basically, Kentrosaurus wasn't just browsing low, it was doing it its own way. It wasn't just a walking fortress of spikes, it was also a hungry little low browser. Like all ornithecians, it was a herbivore, grabbing foliage with its beak and swallowing most of it in big chunks with barely any chewing. Its short stature meant it mostly fed on plants close to the ground, probably ferns, cycads, and other Jurassic greens. On all fours, it could reach up to about 1.7 meters or 5 feet 7 inches, but thanks to its tail-heavy balance, it may have reared up on its hind legs to browse even higher, up to 3.3 meters or 11 feet. That tail wasn't just for defense. It could have served as a balance pole while feeding vertically, though it probably didn't function like a proper tripod. When it comes to sex differences, Kentrosaurus had a story to tell. Paleontologists noticed 2 distinct femur shapes, robust and slender, which didn't correlate with size. With twice as many robust femurs found, researchers suspect sexual dimorphism, where females may have outnumbered males. If true, that hints at a polygynous mating system, one male pairing with multiple females. Earlier studies even suggested females might have had extra sacral ribs to support reproduction, though that remains up for debate. As for mating posture, with all those plates and shoulder spikes, missionary was off the table. They may have mated back to back with the female in a fixed crouch, while the male did some careful maneuvering. Kentrosaurus also grew surprisingly fast for a small stegosaur. Bone studies from 2013 revealed highly vascularized fibrolaminar bone, a type associated with quick growth, outpacing even Stegosaurus. This flips the usual rule that larger dinos grew faster than smaller ones, but let's talk about that tail. Kentrosaurus had at least 40 caudal vertebrae, giving it an incredibly flexible whip of a tail. It could swing 180 degrees behind it, basically covering its whole rear half, and may have reached speeds up to 50 km an hour, 31 miles per hour at the tip. That kind of power could slash skin, crack ribs, or shatter bones. Against small or mid-sized predators, a single hit could be fatal. Some early theories even imagined Kentrosaurus charging backwards, not unlike a porcupine with an attitude. In defense mode, Kentrosaurus may have changed posture entirely. While it normally stood with erect limbs like other dinosaurs, it might have dropped into a more sprawling stance to increase stability when under threat. Its neck was flexible enough to keep an eye on attackers, and thanks to its rear-heavy build, it could pivot around its hips fast, using its tail like a flail. Still, it wasn't invincible. A fast predator could have darted in past the tail's range to strike its unprotected front, and for a big takedown, pack hunting may have been necessary. Kentrosaurus lived about 152 million years ago in what's now Tanzania, and as I said before, its bones come from the famous Tendaguru Formation, which rivals North America's Morrison Formation in dinosaur diversity, but with a twist of tropical flair. The ecosystem was a mix of coastal lagoons, brackish pools, and lush inland forests dominated by conifers. It had a subtropical to tropical climate, with seasonal rains and dry spells, a perfect setup for a small, armored herbivore trying to dodge predators while munching greenery under a Jurassic sun. Decentrurus, whose name means tail full of points, was a stegosaur that redefined what an armored plant eater could be. Living in Europe during the late Jurassic and possibly into the early Cretaceous, around 154 to 140 million years ago, its most famous species, Decentrurus armatus, was first described in 1875 as Omosaurus armatus, after bones were found in a clay pit in Swindon, England. That name, however, turned out to belong to an older animal, so in 1902 it was officially renamed Decentrurus. Over the years, other species were suggested, but today paleontologists generally recognize only Decentrurus armatus as valid. Size that speaks. It ranks among the largest stegosaurs known, stretching 8 to 9 meters or 26 to 30 feet long and weighing in at roughly 5 to 7.4 tons. Imagine something nearly as heavy as a small truck, but covered in plates and spikes. It had a broad, capacious gut, a massive rear torso hinted at by exceptionally wide vertebrae in its back, and an especially durable front limb, especially in the upper arm. Though its hind limbs were relatively short, its forelimbs were longer than you'd expect, giving it a somewhat fore-heavy, squat, but powerfully built stance. Bones built for robustness. Its neck had about 12 vertebrae, and by the time you get to the back, the dorsal series, the forward tail vertebrae, the bones are heavily constructed. The centra, the body of the vertebra, are wider side to side than front to back in many vertebrae, almost like columns made to support great bulk. The sacrum is a beast, 7 vertebrae fused together, plus 2 extra dorsosacrals in front. Neural spines on the tails are thick, rounded at the top, not elegant or thin, but made for strength. Its pelvis is similarly massive and wide, hinting at both strong weight-bearing and huge muscles around the hips. Plates run down the neck and back, but they transition into long spikes over the hips and tail. One preserved spike from Decentrurus is broad at the base and gently curved, unlike the blade, sharp spikes of some Stegosaurus species. The backside of the tail had pairs of long spines. The base of some spikes is thick and stocky, meant to take impact rather than just look good. Some fossil plates near the neck are small and robust at the base, likely serving both display and protection. Because material is limited, scientists disagree on exactly how its plates and spikes were arranged. Recent discoveries, including Spanish specimens, suggest unique traits, autapomorphies, that may help pin down Decentrurus' identity. For example, the upper edge of the ischium bone is unusually straight. The front end of the prepubis, part of the pelvic area, is expanded downward. Neck vertebrae show certain ridges and placement of processes not seen in many other stegosaurs, and its dorsal vertebrae are weirdly wider transversely than long, the opposite to the pattern in most of its relatives. Its humerus, upper arm bone, is huge, with a pronounced crest for muscle attachment. The ratio of forearm bones, ulna radius to upper arm, shows powerful limb strength. Although its thigh bone is long, it's not excessively longer than the humerus, meaning its front limbs weren't weak afterthoughts but active components in its posture and likely used in stabilization or defense. The metacarpals, hand bones, are smoother on the undersides than those of adult Stegosaurus, suggesting differences in how it bore weight or mood. Decentrurus had a tail spine preserved in one specimen, potentially part of the Thagomizer, that tail weapon. The spike is large, with a base over 118 mm wide, sculptured underneath. While its spikes were wide rather than flat, they likely still packed a punch. Combined with its muscular build, strong humerus, large deltopectoral crest, and big thigh muscles, Decentrurus could very likely swing its tail with enough force to slash, jab, or defend itself against big predators of its day like Torvosaurus. In sum, Decentrurus is more than just a massive stegosaur. It's a complex blend of brute strength, defensive adaptations, and evolutionary quirks. Because its fossil record is spotty, there's mystery wrapped around its armor layout and some of its proportions, and that mystery makes it one of the most fascinating stegosaurs to study. Long before Stegosaurus made its iconic debut in North America, another plated herbivore was quietly roaming the Jurassic forests of what is now China. Meet Huayangosaurus, a small but important early stegosaur that walked the Earth around 165 million years ago, during the Middle Jurassic, Bathonian to Calovian stages. Its name is a blend of ancient and modern. Huayang, an old poetic name for Sichuan province, and saurus, meaning lizard. This dino may have only stretched about 4 meters or 13 feet in length and weighed roughly 500 kilograms or 1,100 pounds, but don't let its size fool you. Huayangosaurus taibai was a trailblazer. It was the oldest known stegosaurian when first described in 1982 by Chinese paleontologist Dong Shiming and colleagues, based on fossils uncovered in the Dashampu Quarry, a fossil site teeming with life from the Jurassic world. In many ways, Huayangosaurus looked like a smaller, spikier version of its more famous cousin, Stegosaurus. It was a low-slung, four-legged herbivore with a small, narrow head arched back, and of course, a suit of iconic backplates and tail spikes. But instead of the broad, leaf-shaped plate seen on Stegosaurus, Huayangosaurus sported narrow, spike-like plates that stood upright along its back. These weren't showy billboards, they looked more like sharp fins than flat sails. At the rear, its tail ended in a classic Thagomizer, two pairs of long spikes perfect for discouraging hungry Jurassic predators. But Huayangosaurus went one step further. It had a pair of large spikes near the shoulders, curving backward along its flanks. Whether these were used for display, defense, or both, they added flair and danger to its silhouette. Huayangosaurus wasn't stingy with its armor. In addition to its backplates and tail spikes, it had rows of small bony structures or osteoderms running along its sides. These side rows ended in the prominent shoulder spike, as I said, giving it protection on nearly every angle. The arrangement of armor was complex and quite advanced for such an early member of the Stegosaur lineage. What makes Huayangosaurus really special is how primitive it is, not in a bad way, but in a paleontological sense. Its skull was shorter and broader than later stegosaurs, and, get this, it still had premaxillary teeth at the front of its mouth. That's a trait all later stegosaurs lost, replacing them with a beak-like structure. In evolutionary terms, this dinosaur gives us a glimpse into the transition from more generalized ornithischians to the heavily specialized stegosaurs of the late Jurassic. Its body was also low to the ground, which may explain the presence of those hip and shoulder spikes, perhaps a defense against aerial or high-angle attacks, especially considering its short stature compared to towering theropods of the time. The type specimen includes a partial skeleton with a rare trait, a fairly complete skull, a goldmine for studying early stegosaur anatomy. Altogether, 12 individuals were excavated between 1979 and 1980. Several skeletons were described in detail, though later research, notably by Susanna Maidment and colleagues in 2006, showed that some of the referred specimens may not actually belong to Huayangosaurus, and at least one may even represent a separate species altogether. Today, you could see mounted skeletons of Huayangosaurus at the Qigong Dinosaur Museum and the Chongqing Municipal Museum in China, both located near where this fascinating dinosaur once lived. Huayangosaurus shared its world with some real Jurassic heavyweights. Its neighbors included long-necked sauropods like Decentrurus, Datosaurus, Omeosaurus, and the ornithopod Xiaosaurus. Not to mention Gasosaurus, a carnivorous theropod that might have considered Huayangosaurus a snack, if it could get past those defensive spikes. Scientists often place Huayangosaurus in its own family, Huayangosauridae, defined as any stegosaur more closely related to it than Stegosaurus. This makes it a kind of stem group stegosaur, representing an early branching point before the group exploded in diversity during the late Jurassic. By the time most stegosaurs had disappeared from the Earth, Wuerhosaurus was still holding the line. This tough, spike-tailed survivor was one of the last known stegosaurs to roam the planet, living in what's now China during the early Cretaceous, about 130 million years ago. While its cousins like Stegosaurus had already bowed out at the end of the Jurassic, Wuerhosaurus was still lumbering through prehistoric forests, armor plates and all. And it wasn't alone. It shared that closing chapter with another late surviving stegosaurs like Mongolostegus and Yangbeilong. But make no mistake, Wuerhosaurus was special. The first fossils of Wuerhosaurus homheni, the type species, were discovered in the early 1970s by famed Chinese paleontologist Dong Ming. He named it in 1973 after the city of Wuerhou, near where the bones were found in Xinjiang, a remote, fossil-rich region of northwest China. The remains weren't complete, there was no skull, but what paleontologists did find was intriguing: parts of the pelvis, tail vertebrae, some limb bones, and a few iconic dermal plates. From just a few scattered bones, scientists began to piece together a picture of a broad-bodied, heavily built dinosaur, estimated to be about 7 meters or 23 feet long and weigh up to 4 metric tons, a tank-like herbivore built low and wide. Later, in 1993, Dong described a second species, Wuerhosaurus ordocensis, from Inner Mongolia. Smaller and more lightly built, this one came with a nearly complete torso, a paleontological goldmine. At about 5 meters or 16 feet long and 1.2 tons, Wuerhosaurus ordocensis had a longer neck, a similarly broad belly, but shorter neural spines on its tail, giving it a slightly different silhouette than its chunkier cousin. So, what did Wuerhosaurus look like? Picture a compact stegosaur, shorter plates, but with that signature double row of back armor and a Thagomizer, those wicked tail spikes still ready to swing. For years, scientists thought Wuerhosaurus had unusually flat, rounded plates, a design twist unlike any other stegosaur, but later studies revealed this was likely a trick of time and fossil damage. Its true plate shape remains a bit of a mystery. What we do know is that its pelvis flared outward dramatically, suggesting a very wide belly, possibly for housing a massive gut specialized for digesting tough, fibrous plants. The neural spines at the base of the tail were also exceptionally tall, hinting at strong tail muscles, perfect for delivering forceful swings with its spiked weapon. And those tail spikes weren't just for show. If any predator, like a hungry Sinraptor descended, got too close, Wuerhosaurus had a very pointed response. Where Wuerhosaurus fits on the Stegosaur family tree has been the subject of much scientific arm wrestling. Some researchers place it close to Decentrurus and Hesperosaurus. Others see it as more closely related to the iconic Stegosaurus itself. Whatever the case, one thing is clear. Wuerhosaurus was among the most derived stegosaurs, meaning it came at the tail end, pun intended, of the evolutionary line, and it had picked up plenty of advanced features. Think of it as sort of a last model stegosaur, the final iteration of an armored design that had once ruled the Jurassic. While full skeletons are rare, Wuerhosaurus may have left its mark in other ways, literally. In the Tagulu group of Xinjiang, paleontologists have found stegosaur footprints, including the smallest known tracks ever found from this group. Measuring just 5.7 centimeters or 2.2 inches long, they likely belong to a baby Wuerhosaurus, a cat-sized hatchling tiptoeing through the ancient mud. Imagine that, a miniature spike-tailed dinosaur following its colossal armor-plated parents through a lush Cretaceous forest. Those footprints are a quiet echo of an entire family of dinosaurs fading into history, a tiny glimpse into the final age of stegosaurs. Though often compared to Stegosaurus, Wuerhosaurus was no simple copycat. It had a longer neck, a broader build, and probably different plate shapes, though the fossil record leaves some of that up to the imagination. It may have even had unique adaptations to the slightly cooler, drier environments of the early Cretaceous, as global climates were shifting and new types of dinosaurs, especially ceratopsians and ankylosaurs, were starting to dominate. Tuojiangosaurus, whose name means to a river lizard, was a remarkable stegosaurian dinosaur that lived during the late Jurassic. Its fossils were uncovered in the Upper Shashimiao Formation of Sichuan Province, China, an area that has produced some of the most iconic dinosaurs in Asia. The animal was no lightweight. At around 6.5 meters long and weighing nearly 3 tons, Tuojiangosaurus rivaled its famous North American cousin Stegosaurus in size and build. With its small, narrow head, bulky body, and short forelimbs, it carried the classic profile of a stegosaur. Yet among Chinese stegosaurs, Tuojiangosaurus is by far the best understood. What really sets it apart are its defenses. Like Kentrosaurus, Tuojiangosaurus bore 2 rows of bony plates running down its back. These plates changed shape along the spine, rounding at the neck. more triangular over the hips and thickened in the center, as if halfway between plate and spike. At the end of the tail, it wielded a fearsome weapon, the famous Thagomizer, a set of robust spikes angled outward. Some paleontologists suggest it had 4 pairs of tail spikes. Others envision a deadly pincushion arrangement. Either way, this was a dinosaur well prepared to fend off predators like Huayangosaurus. The story of its discovery is equally fascinating. In 1974, during construction of the Wuerhosaurus Dam in Qigong, workers stumbled upon the bones of a strange plated dinosaur. Just 3 years later, in 1977, exactly a century after Stegosaurus was first described, paleontologist Dong Shiming and colleagues officially named the find Tuojiangosaurus multispinus, or many-spined lizard of the Tuo River. The skeleton was one of the most complete stegosaurs ever found in Asia, giving scientists their first real look at this group in China. Today, mounted skeletons of Tuojiangosaurus stand proudly in museums across the world, from the Chongqing Municipal Museum in China to the Natural History Museum in London and even the Bolton Museum in the UK. In Beijing, one dramatic display shows it locked in eternal combat with Huayangosaurus, a striking reminder of the dangers it once faced. For decades, scientists debated exactly where Tuojiangosaurus fits on the Stegosaur family tree. Some analyses placed it close to Stegosaurus itself, while others linked it more closely with earlier Asian forms like Huayangosaurus. Though its exact position is still debated, one thing is clear. Tuojiangosaurus was a vital piece in understanding how stegosaurs spread and diversified across the world. Long before the iconic Stegosaurus roamed North America, another plated dinosaur was making its mark in what is now Sichuan Province, China. Meet Challingosaurus, the Charling lizard. Living about 160 million years ago, this herbivore is among the oldest known stegosaurs, a pioneer of the plated dinosaurs that would later spread across the globe. Picture a relatively small stegosaur, only around 4 meters long, browsing on Jurassic greenery. Ferns, cycads, and other low-lying plants would have made up most of its diet, fueling a life lived in herds near river valleys, though not as massive or heavily armored as its later relatives. Challingosaurus represents an early experiment in the famous stegosaur body plan, plates, spikes, and all. The discovery story takes us back to 1957, when geologist Quan Yawu collected bones along the Charling River in southern China. Just 2 years later, in 1959, famous paleontologist Yang Shongjiang, often called the father of Chinese paleontology, formally named the species Challingosaurus quani, honoring Quan for the find. This was a historic moment. Challingosaurus became the first stegosaur ever described from China. The fossils themselves were fragmentary but intriguing, parts of the backbone, limb bones, and several plates and spines. Later excavations added more material, including a partial skull, making the picture a bit clearer. Interestingly, all of the specimens we have are juveniles or subadults, meaning we've never actually seen what a fully grown Challingosaurus looked like. Reconstructing the animal has always been a challenge. Yang originally modeled it after Kentrosaurus, placing plates along its back and spikes near the hips and tail. Later studies debated its exact identity. Some paleontologists suggested it was a slender, primitive ancestor of other stegosaurs. Others argued it was more closely related to Kentrosaurus itself. By the early 2000s, opinions shifted again. Some researchers went so far as to call Challingosaurus a nomen dubium, a dubious name, since the bones don't seem to preserve any unique features that firmly distinguish it from other stegosaurs. But even if its scientific status is debated, its importance is undeniable. Challingosaurus marked the beginning of a stegosaur research in China and highlighted the deep evolutionary roots of these bizarre plated dinosaurs. In short, Tuojiangosaurus may not be the most famous stegosaur, nor the most spectacular, but it's a vital piece of the puzzle. It shows us that by the late Jurassic, stegosaurs were already spreading across the world, experimenting with armor, spikes, and plates in countless forms. And for paleontologists, it's a reminder that even fragmentary fossils can change the way we understand the history of life. Among late Jurassic stegosaurs, one dinosaur stands out for a feature you wouldn't expect: its neck. Meet Miragaia longicolum, a long-necked stegosaur from Portugal's Lourinhã Formation, and possibly even the Morrison Formation in Wyoming, USA. What makes Miragaia extraordinary is its neck. At least 17 vertebrae, the longest known for any stegosaur, surpassing most sauropods. Some researchers suggest it may be closely related to or even a junior synonym of Decentrurus, but its anatomy is undeniably remarkable. Measuring 6 to 6.5 meters or 20 to 21 feet long and weighing around 2 tons, Miragaia was relatively lightweight. Even fully grown, it retained a slender, elongated form, with a sharp, pointed snout and distinctive triangular plates along its neck. These plates were lightly convex and hooked at the top, reflecting a trend toward longer necks in stegosaurs. Early stegosaurs had just 9 cervical vertebrae, later ones 12 or 13, but Miragaia pushed that number to 17, challenging the idea that stegosaurs were strictly low-browsing herbivores. Why such a long neck? Scientists suggest it allowed Miragaia to reach plants that other herbivores couldn't, carving out a unique feeding niche. Unlike sauropods, it didn't add new vertebrae. Instead, some back vertebrae transformed into neck vertebrae, giving it extraordinary reach. Minor elongation of individual vertebrae may have played a role, but the main driver was this clever reassignment of its skeleton. Beyond the neck, Miragaia shared many stegosaur traits: a toothless, pendant-shaped beak, fused cervical ribs, ornamented nasal bones, and a powerful tail likely capable of high-speed defensive strikes. Its long neck combined with a classic stegosaur body plan makes Miragaia a fascinating example of evolutionary innovation, a dinosaur that expanded our understanding of what stegosaurs could be. Imagine a stegosaur unlike any other, not just armored, but crowned with enormous shoulder spines that towered above its back. This was Gigantspinosaurus, a late Jurassic dinosaur from what is now China, a creature that combined the classic stegosaur plates with one truly dramatic twist. Measuring around 4 meters or 14 feet long and relatively lightweight for a stegosaur, Gigantspinosaurus wasn't a giant compared to some of its Jurassic neighbors, yet its extraordinary spines made it instantly recognizable. These massive shoulder spikes, anchored on broad, flat bases, extended higher than the animal's back, giving it a formidable silhouette against the prehistoric landscape. Its smaller dorsal plates and triangular neck plates emphasize the dramatic effect of these spines, making this stegosaur both bizarre and fascinating. Despite its spiny armor, Gigantspinosaurus was built for movement. Its strong, muscular forearms and broad hips allowed it to navigate the forests and floodplains of the late Jurassic, while its head, equipped with dozens of teeth, was perfectly suited for chewing tough plant material. Interestingly, impressions of its skin reveal a pattern of scales arranged in intricate rosettes, giving it a textured, almost mosaic-like appearance that likely added to its visual display. This dinosaur occupies a unique place in stegosaur evolution. It retains some primitive features seen in early stegosaurs, but also showed traits closer to its more advanced relatives. Its enormous shoulder spines may have served multiple purposes: defense against predators, intimidation of rivals, or even display to attract mates. Pteranodon was a stegosaurian dinosaur that lived in what is now South Africa during the late Cretaceous, roughly 139 to 131 million years ago. It was among the first stegosaurs discovered in the region, known from a partial skull, isolated teeth, and vertebral fragments recovered from the Kirkwood Formation. The fossils were first identified in 1845, with British paleontologist Richard Owen attributing them to the Parasaur anthodon. Later, South African paleontologist Robert Broom recognized the skull as representing a distinct dinosaur and named it Paleosyncus africanus. Independently, Hungarian paleontologist Franz Nowska later described the same material as a new genus and species, Paranthrodon owenii. Today, both names are considered synonyms of Paranthrodon africanus. The genus name combines the Greek para, near, with anthodon, reflecting its initial misidentification. Initially classified as an ankylosaur by Broom and supported by Coombs in the 1970s, Paranthodon was later reassigned to the Stegosauria by Nowska in 1929, a view confirmed in modern reviews. While 2018 research highlighted only one distinctive feature, phylogenetic analysis consistently place it among stegosaurids, closely related to Stegosaurus, Tuojiangosaurus, and Loricatosaurus. Paranthodon was relatively small compared to its larger relatives, estimated around 5 meters or 16 feet long and weighing 450 to 900 kilograms or 1 to 2,000 pounds. Its skull featured an elongated convex snout, large external nares, and a broad posterior premaxilla. Teeth were characterized by prominent primary ridges, and the maxilla preserved a horizontal, slightly sinuous tooth row with a small diastema. The nasal bones were dorsally convex with thickened side ridges, while the premaxilla was toothless, a trait shared with most stegosaurs. Overall, cranial morphology resembled Stegosaurus, though tooth shape distinguishes it from other stegosaurs such as Kentrosaurus and Huayangosaurus. The Kirkwood Formation, spanning the late Jurassic to early Cretaceous, has yielded a rich assemblage of vertebrates, including basal tetaneurons, sauropods like Allosaurus, ornithopods, crocodilians, turtles, and early mammals. Paranthodon was the first stegosaur discovered there, and additional fragmentary material suggests the possibility of a wider geographic range, with similar teeth reported from Ethiopia's Mugar locality, dating to approximately 151 million years ago. In summary, Paranthodon represents a small but distinctive stegosaur from early Cretaceous Africa, providing valuable insight into the diversity and distribution of early stegosaurs on the continent. Yingshanosaurus, which means Yingshan lizard, was a stegosaurian dinosaur that lived during the Middle Jurassic in what is now southwestern China. Known from a partial skeleton discovered in 1983, this dinosaur includes parts of the spine, tail, limbs, hip, and shoulder bones, and several bony plates and spikes. The only species, Yingshanosaurus gishuanensis, was formally described in 1994, though for years many paleontologists outside China were unaware of the research and questioned its validity. Like its stegosaur relatives, Yingshanosaurus was a slow-moving, plant-eating quadruped. Measuring about 4 to 5 meters or 13 to 16 feet long, it was medium-sized for a stegosaur. Its forelimbs were shorter than its hind limbs, giving it a slight sloped posture, and it had a wide torso. Flattened, semi-triangular plates ran in pairs along its neck, back, and tail, while a large shoulder spine likely offered protection against predators. Though no tail spikes have been preserved, it probably had a Thagomizer like other stegosaurs. Its sacral vertebrae were nearly fused, and its anatomy shows traits typical of more advanced stegosaurs in the Stegosaurinae family. The fossils come from China's Upper Shashimiao Formation, an area rich in Middle Jurassic life. Alongside Yingshanosaurus, this region has yielded sauropods, theropods, other stegosaurs, early ornithischians, turtles, crocodiliforms, mammals, and fish. The environment back then was semi-arid to semi-humid, with meandering rivers and seasonal lakes shaping the landscape. The discovery story is also fascinating. In 1983, a villager in Jichuan stumbled upon part of the skeleton while digging a house foundation. Paleontologists from the Chongqing Natural History Museum, with local support, quickly excavated the remains. Over the next year, additional fossil material was carefully recovered, including vertebrae, limb bones, and 5 osteoderms. Despite early reports in the 1980s, Huayangosaurus wasn't officially named until Xu Songling's 1994 study. Its anatomy paints a vivid picture: a small-headed herbivore with a broad, slightly arched back, tall neural spines, and distinctive plates and spikes along its body. Its shoulder spine likely helped shield the torso, while its paired dorsal plates may have been used for display or species recognition rather than defense. The limbs suggest a mature, robust animal capable of supporting its weight as it moved slowly through Jurassic forests and floodplains. Huayangosaurus stands out among Chinese stegosaurs for its derived features, bridging the gap between earlier basal forms and later, more specialized stegosaurs. It provides a rare glimpse into the evolutionary diversity of stegosaurs in Jurassic Asia, highlighting a fascinating mix of primitive and advanced traits within a single genus. Thyreosaurus is an extinct genus of stegosaurian dinosaur from the Middle Jurassic El-Mez III Formation of Morocco. The genus contains a single species, Thyreosaurus atlasicus, known from a partial, disarticulated skeleton that includes dorsal vertebrae, ribs, a limb bone, and dermal armor. This dinosaur is notable for its distinctive osteoderms, which display an asymmetrical texture, suggesting that its plates may have lain recumbent rather than upright. Alongside Adraculite, Thyreosaurus highlights the diversity of stegosaurs inhabiting Middle Jurassic Africa. The holotype specimen, HIIUC-BN00, was discovered in 2021 at the Bolafa North locality near Bolemene in Morocco's Middle Atlas Mountains. The disarticulated remains consist of 9 dorsal vertebrae, 21 fragmentary ribs, a limb bone tentatively identified as a fibula, and 6 osteoderms. Initial reports of the fossils appeared in conference abstracts during 2022 and 2023, prior to the formal description. In 2024, Zafati and colleagues formally described the species as Thyreosaurus atlasicus. The genus name derives from the Greek thyreos, referring to an oblong shield in reference to its unusual dermal armor, and sauros meaning lizard. The species name, atlasicus, honors the Atlas Mountains where the fossils were found. The holotype represents an adult individual approximately 6 meters or 20 feet long, though it had not reached full maturity. Its dermal armor is particularly distinctive, resembling that of nodosaurid ankylosaurs, with oblong plates arranged asymmetrically along the back. Unlike the erect plates of most stegosaurs, these may have lain flat, offering a unique defensive or display adaptation. Phylogenetic analysis places Thyreosaurus within the Decentrurine stegosaurs, closely related to Decentrurus. Together, these taxa form a clade that is the sister group to Adraticlite, a contemporaneous stegosaur from the same region. This relationship underscores the variety of stegosaur lineages present in the Middle Jurassic of North Africa and adds to our understanding of early stegosaur evolution outside of Europe.